What I'm looking for is details that I can isolate. Something that's brightly coloured that is in front of something which is dark. I don't get too fixated on one idea. Good afternoon everyone, thanks for joining me again. Today I'm back at Font Rojs. This is the location I came to a couple of weeks ago. Last time I was here, I was only here for about an hour or so, just long enough to have a quick look around and really to decide if it was worth coming back and spending a longer time here. Now, even though I wasn't here for very long, I got some images that I was actually really quite pleased with, so I decided to come back today. Now, I've kind of underestimated how chilly it is up here. I'm actually feeling quite cold, and I've also underestimated how windy it is. The weather forecast didn't say it was going to be windy, but it is. Now obviously that can cause some challenges with the type of shots that I had in mind, which is kind of leaves with shadows behind them, and if the leaves are moving, that's going to make it difficult to get them sharp. So there's probably going to be a bit of patience involved here in terms of getting shots. So because this is a parquet natural, it's a conservation area, there are actually rules about coming here, and one of the rules is you have to stay on the trails. Now, yeah, I could probably get away with sneaking off the trails and finding some interesting shots, but I think it's important that when these things are done for conservation purposes that we respect that. So I will be sticking to the trails. And as always, I'll talk you through any shots that I take. So, let's get going. What I'm really looking for as I'm walking around on these trails is the intimate landscape shot. And if you're wondering what that means, the intimate shot is kind of not the big scene, not the big wide angle view, and it's not the macro view, it's somewhere in between, it's details. And what I'm looking for is details that I can isolate. Now, we've got some really nice colourful leaves here. They're not the sort of the deep reds that you might see in autumn, fall if you prefer, in some places, but they've got some beautiful yellows and oranges, and if I can isolate those, then they can make for a really nice shot. Now, in terms of isolating them, what I really want to do is find something that's brightly coloured that is in front of something which is dark. So if I've got brightly coloured leaves in front of a dark green shadowy background, especially if those leaves are catching the light and the background's fully in shadow, then I can isolate that, underexpose it, boost the contrast, and it will really make it pop. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. But I'm not limiting myself. I'm keeping my eyes open and just seeing what other opportunities come up. It's always important to do that. Don't get too fixated on one idea, because you could just miss something special. Okay, so I've got a shot set up here. It's not really what I was looking for, but it does appeal to me. So let me just talk you through the composition and the setup now. So I've got the rocks in the foreground, and then we've got this little sort of grassy area with some leaves on, and then these beautiful leaves on this bush, lovely colours, greens and yellows, and then all the way up to this kind of rocky finger pointing to the sky, and then the clouds rushing past, so the blue and the white in the sky. we've got a big contrast between the white clouds in the sky and the darkness of the scene, particularly down in the foreground. So I'm going to do 2 exposures, 2 stops apart. So I'm going to do one at 1/25th of a second and one at 1/100th of a second, and then I can merge those later. I don't need to do 3 shots, 2 is fine. I can merge those later, and that will let me get a good exposure throughout the scene, keeping details in the clouds and keeping details in the shadow areas in the foreground, and hopefully picking out some nice colours on the leaves in the tree. Okay, so I found something which is the kind of thing that I've been looking for. And let me show you what it is. This little group of leaves just here. Now what I like about these is that if we look at where they're positioned, behind them it's all in shadow. So if I underexpose this image and boost the contrast in post-processing, what I'm going to get is nice bright leaves and a nice dark background. Just a hint of detail in there. I don't want it completely black, but nice and dark. So I've set up, I had the 70-200 lens on a roughly 105mm. Portrait orientation, f11 and 1/25th of a second, ISO 64. So I've come up onto one of the kind of lookout points that they've got dotted around, and the views from up here are spectacular. I'm going to give you a quick spin around in a moment, see if we can actually show you what the views are like all the way around. But first, I've actually seen a shot that I want to take, and it's basically, which one am I turning? It's basically these kind of patterns in the fields here running out, and then the clouds out on the horizon. It's not a wide angle shot. I've got the 70-200 lens on at 70mm, and I'm really having those kind of field patterns running from the bottom right hand corner of the frame diagonally across the scene, and then the top third is the clouds in the sky. Scene's not too contrasty, so I don't need any filters or anything like that. There's some quite nice light on those fields, and I'm just shooting f11 1/60th of a second. And that's interesting. That looks quite nice. I'm not sure if there's any other shots I'm going to do from up here. I'll have a look. But first, let me try and give you a quick spin around. think I'm going to do another shot, basically looking in the same direction as the previous one, but down in the middle of those fields there's a little tiny farmhouse. There's actually a road running through there as well, but that farmhouse is kind of sitting out there isolated. So what I'm doing is kind of framing the fields with some trees in the foreground, the trees and the hills in the background. There's no sky in there, and then the farmhouse is kind of sitting kind of in the middle of the frame vertically, but over on the left hand side horizontally, if that makes sense. And I think just with the sort of the really pale bleached colour of the fields with a light on them and some shadows, that could look quite nice. It's 200mm on the 70-200 lens and the same settings, f11 1/60th of a second. Might look quite nice. So, behind me over here, the whole side of the mountain is covered in trees, and some of those trees have got some really nice colours in, some oranges and some yellows, even a few reds. So I'm trying a shot. I don't know about this one. It might work, it might not. Basically the top third corner of the scene is the sky with some clouds, and the rest of it is the hillside with all those colours on. Now there's a lot of contrast between the darkness on the side of the mountain and the brightness in the sky. Now I could use an ND grad, but I just feel that the uneven shape of the mountain with the trees sticking up, I just don't think it's going to work. I think it's going to be too harsh. So I'm going to shoot 2 exposures. So we've got some quite nice light on the trees and bringing the colours out quite nicely. So I'm going to do one shot at 1/50th of a second. That's blowing the highlights in the sky quite a lot. So I'm going to bring the exposure down. I think 1/25th of a second. Yeah, and that's kept the highlight detail, and I can merge those really easily, probably just in Lightroom, and hopefully that'll make for a nice image. So yeah, it might work. It's all about the colours on this one. We'll have to see what it looks like in post. Okay, I found another nice bright little patch of leaves. In fact, I found several, but trying to find one that I can isolate is proving to be more of a challenge. And down on this little tree down here, there's a few leaves just wrapping around the branch. And what I'm doing is isolating those. I'm shooting with the 70-200 lens. Probably about 150mm, f11, 1/25th of a second, which is really underexposed, but that's allowing the leaves to really pop. All I've got to do now is wait for the wind to drop so the leaves aren't moving, so I can take the shot. And here we go, hopefully. I think it's time to wrap this one up. I've got about 20 minutes or 25 minutes of walking still to do to get back to the car, and then it's about an hour's drive home. This is definitely a place I'll be coming back to again and again, maybe not in the next few weeks because I've got a few other new locations that I want to check out, but certainly later on going into next year, and definitely next autumn. I'm going to come here several times next autumn and see if I can catch the leaves at their best, because it's one of the few places around here that we can actually get autumn colours. Anyway, I'll stop blathering on and just say I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have and you haven't done already, perhaps you want to hit subscribe. That would be much appreciated, as would any likes or shares that you'd like to give me. As always, I'd love to hear from you, so the comments down below and I'll respond as soon as I can. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos. So, thank you very much, and until the next video, bye.